Hey, it's Jeremy from Jeremy.net. I am a comic book artist, writer, self publisher, and I share my creative process with you here live online. If you would like to get bonus videos, bonus blog posts for as little as $2 a month, you can go to patreon.com/GERIMI. That is my Patreon account. You can support this channel, support the existing videos that I create, and get additional bonus content. It would be greatly appreciated. If you would like to read some of my comics, see the work that I'm creating, my current comic book series, Morning Star, which is Lucifer's Fall from Heaven, told as a Western, or my previous graphic novel, Eye of the Gods, a psychological thriller about a man cursed with visions he can't control, you can go to comics.jeremy.net. There you can download previews, PDF previews for free of my comics, read them, see what type of work I'm making, hear about my creative process, see it as opposed to just hear me talking about it. And if you would like to buy some of my books physically, or if you're living outside of the United States and shipping is a pain in the ass, you can also get it on Amazon Kindle. You can go to amazon.jeremy.net. That will forward you to my Amazon author page. My books are also available on Comixology if you use Comixology, but I'm already loading you up a bunch of links already, so it's a lot to go through. I see some folks already popping up in the chat. I see Iron Rocks is here. I see Lego Studios is here. Hey guys, thanks for dropping by. Thanks for joining me. Sierra Studios is here too. How's it going? Nice to see you. All right. So last week I tried changing things up and having my the chat on a screen beside me while I'm working seemed to work pretty well, so I'm going to have that on here. Although the one thing I noticed is that when I have the chat next to the screen, I look down a little too much, looking away from the camera. So the microphone didn't pick up every word. It didn't sound as crisp and rich as I would like it to. So I'm going to try and see if I can make it a point to look up and face the mic while I'm reading. What I really should do is just run all of this through my desktop computer instead of running it through my phone, so that I can have a separate microphone set up at the desk. But that's a discussion for another day. So, all right, my desk is a bit of a mess right now. My drawing board. Excuse me, the cough that will never die. Up here previously, I was working on. I think I had mentioned when I was doing the Goodnight pieces that I wanted to do a second version that was backlit. So this is the ink version of that, and it's almost done. I just need to fill in the girl's hair, shadows on the pillow, and then come in with a little bit of ink wash for the shadows. So this one's almost done. But honestly, a lot of times when I feel like when I'm finishing a piece, when I'm really putting the finishing touches on there, I really need to focus. And there's a little mistake that I made in the previous one that I don't really want to repeat. So I decided to put that aside. And I know that you guys are all very supportive of the fact that I share all of the things that I'm working on. I'm sharing the illustrations, I'm sharing the figure drawing work because I feel it's important for you to see that it's not like I just sit down and make comics. I'm doing all these other things to try and help improve my creative process, to continue to learn, like, the figure drawing and such. But I've gotten the feeling that most of the people that are following my channel are here for the comics. So I thought, let me just sit down and really get back to that. And I'm not even sure if I will post figure drawing work for the next month. I was just curious as to what happens if I were to spend a month focusing just on on drawing, working on the thumbnails, and hopefully getting through that, moving on to what comes after thumbnails? Lettering. Well, hopefully the lettering will go quickly, because I don't think it's an integral part, and for me it's interesting because it's where a lot of the dialogue writing happens, but I don't know if it's particularly the most visually compelling part of my process. So I've got my outline up here. I've got a couple of my macro thumbnails. That process I showed you where I just do a thumbnail for each page, and then like one image for each page, and then I go over and I do this is what my thumbnails usually look like. In fact, let me bring the camera down a little even more. The way that my thumbnails usually look is sort of a grid that has one page on it, tiny scratchy boxes, so it's to be page 8 and page 9, and then me going in and drawing possible variations of what will go into these boxes with a little more detail and notations. And I just make a point for like page 8, this bottom tier, it'll be 8-2 because it's going to be 2 panels, 1 and 2. So I just sort of have a numbering system. But this is what my thumbnails usually look like page by page. The whole thing of doing it on these separate cards was to help me work out the story as a whole. I'm repeating myself a little bit for you guys that are regular watchers, but this is also good to give background. It's not like I expect you guys to know remember every single bit of what my personal creative process is, because you guys are all busy with your own artwork, you're busy on other things, there's other artists that you follow. So it's good to give you a little, review, catch up of where I am before I dive in. This is the stack of cards I have that are the thumbnails for the overall series. So this is like, I don't know, 40 plus pages of comics, because there's a couple of alternate versions of it, and the whole issue, the final issue of Morningstar is going to be 40 pages. So, let me see here. See if I can find a good place to clip my my tablet. So I've got the chat over by the side. The challenge is finding a place where I can easily see it, but that it's also out of the way while I'm working. Well, that's weird. All right, for some reason, the chat just decided to disappear from my tablet. Oh wait, it's because I revolved the screen. All right, there we go. So let's dive in. I've got to put a little ink in my inkwell there. Currently using some Dr. P.H. Martin's Bombay Black ink. Usually, in the past, I've usually worked with Speedball ink, Speedball Super Black. And the Doc Martens is a very good ink, but the main reason why I bought it really is because I needed a new bottle, because I'd been using a very old bottle of Higgins Black Magic ink for many years. I would just refill that ink with whatever ink I was using because I liked the bottle. I liked the shape of the neck. It kept stuff from spilling out. But over recent months, it started leaking, and it was hard to get open. And this is a bottle that I've been refilling for probably well over a decade. I thought, you know what? Time to get a new bottle. So I'm not saying that I won't continue using the Doc Martens because it's an excellent ink. But I have, let me see, where is it? I have a big ass bottle of what I usually use, which is the Speedball Super Black. And what I'll probably do is when the Doc Martens is all empty, then I'll just continue filling from this. And this one's like a brand new, fresh one. It's like, I bought this and just haven't had a chance to use much of it because I was going back and forth, and the old bottle I had was leaking of this stuff. So I bought this new bottle, and I'm still have to use all that's in here. That just means I need to draw more. That's the real answer. If I got more draw done, I'd go through the ink quicker. All right. Oh, I see Amaris is in the chat. Thanks for joining. She asks, did I miss live? Nope, you are right on time. We just got started a little while ago, giving everybody, for both new and old, a catch up on where I'm at. So, we are on page 8 and page 9 of Morningstar. And for my indecipherable scribbles, let me give you a quick recap in terms of the actual story, what I'm doing. So what's happening on this page is Lucifer has now returned to heaven with an army of angels and and rebel angels and demons in tow. So they're riding through, and then the bottom tier. So in this comic page, I kind of divided it into a 9-panel grid, sort of like Watchmen style. But that was more sort of for visual structure. I've decided that this page is going to be 2/3 of it is going to be one large panel, which is going to be the panel of Lucifer and his rebels, his army. And the bottom tier is just going to be 1/3, and it's going to be a long panel. And you can barely tell what this is. This image is only slightly more legible. A lot of times when I do thumbnails, they are super rough, and the only point of it is enough information that I can do a proper layout drawing. My layouts are basically rough pencils. But the point is that on this bottom page, you see the reaction. So I try to think when I draw in terms of cause and effect, cause and effect. Lucifer rides into heaven, and I haven't worked out the dialogue here, but basically he offers them an opportunity to surrender and to follow him, to follow him as their leader, their ruler. And the bottom tier here is their response to that. So you've got a woman angel carrying an infant. She's sort of running off to the side. You've got 3 angels coming out of a door with shotguns, running to confront Lucifer. You've got someone, you've got a pair of shutters over windows. And this guy, they're in between closing, so you see his arms there, he's kind of pulling them closed. So you've got like the comparison of people running out to meet him, as well as one person running away, frightened. I feel like there probably should be more people running away than running towards him. But at the same time, it's not like these angels are cowards. They're there to defeat, they're there to stand against evil. And now that they've seen that Lucifer is this force for evil, he's turned against them, he's come to invade them, then you can they're coming to stand their ground to fight against him. Here is where we get into a little bit of me working through details and not sure how the rest of this page is going to go. I know that this page ends with an angel, basically his head getting blown off. That's the thumbnail that I chose to represent page 9, just a thumbnail of one of the angels standing up, an older angel. In fact, I kind of called out that I wanted to have sort of a look at like Sam Elliott. Like I wanted to feel very Western. And this isn't me hating Sam Elliott. I think he's a fantastic actor. I think that he is somebody who's an actor very symbolic in a lot of contemporary and Westerns over the years. But the idea of this weathered spokesman for the towns who I think would look like a kind of an old cowboy angel, standing up to Lucifer, telling him to get out of there. If anything, he's there to surrender to him. And then Lucifer just casually raising his arm, raising his hand, and shooting him. It's not meant to denigrate the actor. It is meant to show Lucifer's complete embracing of darkness and brutality. It's like he's gone full Anakin at this point. So the way that I have it worked out in here is I don't have the details worked out, but I've got sort of Lucifer in the the horse in the foreground, indicating that Lucifer is sitting on top of it, talking. Then you've got a group of angels standing, led by this guy, countering him and his offer for surrender, and then a close-up of the character. So the idea of this close-up is simply to give you a sense of the person, that it's not just some random guy talking, but this is a guy who conceivably could have been a character. And this is one of the downsides of doing the thumbnails issue by issue, because if I had known in my head that this particular scene is coming, I would have found ways to seed this character throughout the books. You actually felt a little bit more for him when he gets executed. And this is something that I should keep in mind. I've been listening to interviews with Kieran Gillen, the creator of Wicked and the Wicked and the Divine and Phonogram, which, mind you, I've read, I think, the first volume of Phonogram, but I haven't read any of Wick Dev, and I want to. It's one of those things I need to put on my list, but That list of stuff to read is very, very massive. But the point is that he mentioned, I think, in one random interview, because he had a podcast called Decompressed, and I was like binge listening to a bunch of them. And he interviews a lot of other comic creators. And one of the things he talks about is how he will put in details not knowing how they're going to pay off. Like, for instance, if I had to seeded this character and then I just decided I need a character here, I don't know why or when I'm going to need him, but he'll do that not knowing how it's going to pay off when he's writing in the early stages. And then when he gets later into a series, he's like, oh, wait, I can use this character that I put in there. And then people are like, oh my God, you planned that from the start. He's just like, ha 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 ha, ha. Yeah. But the genius is being able to put details into the story at an early phase without knowing how they're going to pay off. That's something I did not do enough of early on in Morningstar. And it's something that in future comics I'm really going to try and pay attention to, is seeing where there are places where I can make, where I don't know what I'm going to use a character for, or a vehicle, or a weapon, but kind of the Chekhov's gun idea that if you see a gun early on in the scene, it has to go off. If you see a gun in the first act, it has to go off by the third act of a story. Trying to find ways to put those kind of details into the comic, even if I don't know what the payoff is. Or I can just work on things where I thumbnail out the entire graphic novel before I draw a single page. That would be preference, but you would see a lot fewer comics from me. It would take longer than a process that is already incredibly long. I have to throw a cat toy now because my cat's underneath my chair and won't leave me alone until I do that. Ooh. There you go, Monk. There we go. All right, so what I'm looking for here is the fact that I know what my final shot is. And a lot of, like, when I drew this grid here, this very messy, scribbly grid, I started with that end shot. And I kind of knew I was going to bracket it, like, this is the end, this is the beginning. In fact, that's kind of what a lot of these thumbnails are. It's like I kind of know how I'm going to start a page or end a page, and that's what will be. It's not always the shot that I use for these macro thumbnails, but it gives me an anchor to build the story around. In this case, it is very definitely the beginning of one page and the end of the other. So it's like, it's the brackets of this scene. Pardon me while I get a little cough here. This cough refuses to go away. So really, I'm happy with what I've indicated on page 8. Page 8 to me feels done. In fact, the one thing I want to do is just make notes of what this is. So, and these are for me when I come back later, because I may not be drawing my layouts for another month, depending on how quickly I can get my thumbnails done. So I make little notes like three armed angels coming outdoor. I don't know if you can hear that. That is a cat that wants to play. And for some reason, they always seem to want to do it while I'm live streaming. I should create a channel called Cats and Comics. Comics and Cats. I don't know. Let's see. This guy. Closing shutters. Yeah, I'm drawing comics. Monkey, relax. Let's see. Amaris says, I just got me a new tablet to draw on. You know what? I'm glad to hear it. As I've said before, you know what? I actually, the only reason why I draw traditionally is because I like I like being able to not have to stare at a computer screen after being at work all day. That said, thumbnailing and layouts are actually, in my opinion, easier to do digitally. I mean, once you have your basic drawing skills down, in terms of just your workflow, the whole point of thumbnails and layouts is to make changes and to make rapid iterations, to be able to, if something's not right, just stretch it, scale it, move it over. Obviously, these are all things that are much easier working digitally than working traditionally. So I always say that people should do what works best for them. So who knows? Maybe you should try giving your thumbnails and layouts done. Give them a shot doing it digitally. I see Travis is in the chat. What's up, man? Thanks for popping in. Let's see here. All right. So just making notes on what's happening in these sketches. Okay. Woman running with baby. So this bottom panel of page 8 is really about getting that sense of chaos that Lucifer brings when he's returning to heaven. Now, on page 9, this really comes down to me trying to figure out, to fill in. Honestly, it's kind of like an establishing shot for that page above, because I'm pretty happy with what's happening on the rest of the pages. I'm happy with this one to the point where a lot of times I won't make if this thumbnail, as tiny as this drawing is, and I'm going to zoom down a little bit so that you can see it a little clearer. Bring it down a little bit more. So, as tiny as this sketch is, this communicates enough for me, and you can see how tiny it is because you can see the size of this brush. You talk about thumbnails, it literally, let me put my thumb on the page. The character's head is literally the size of my thumb. But this tells me enough of what I need. This one, I just didn't like the pose. And I also realized I prefer, even though Lucifer is ambidextrous, I prefer to have him using his left hand most of the time because it's kind of I don't know, the idea of your left hand being the dark hand, the evil hand, the cursed hand. So I realized that I had him using his right hand to shoot this angel, so I wanted to switch it to him doing his left hand. The pose still isn't quite right, only because this is going to be a squarish panel, and the layout that I have here is more, it's more oblong, more rectangular. So I might have to do it where you're getting a little bit more perspective on him, turning him a little bit more. Amaris also mentioned that she already does her layouts digitally. Well, good for you. I'm happy to hear it. You're using that technology. All right. So these other sketches here were just me ballparking of spitballing thought was going to be going on this page. Like I had a couple of, these are thoughts I considered, was just a thin panel of Lucifer's hand resting on his gun, and I didn't even draw it that well. But in the end, I just decided showing him raising his gun and then seeing the other person shot covers everything that I really want to. So let's say that this, even though the pose isn't exactly what I want, if this final shot, it's just got one, I still haven't decided whether this is going to be one full tear or not. But let's presume that this is one, that's panel 2, panel 3, and panel 4. So I just make a little note here, 8, 3. And then all the ones that I don't put numbers next to are just whatever random, those are just the random thoughts of me trying out different possibilities. I like to see all these different possibilities on the page as I'm sketching out here. So really on this top panel, what I'm going for emotionally at the top of page 9 is these angels taking a stand against Lucifer. Now let's say, there's a couple of different ways I can skin this cat, as it were. I can put a horizon line at the about the eye line. Have that older angel there, standing up. What's wrong, monkey? You don't like my comics? My editor says that my story flow is weak. She thinks I should put in a little bit of foreshadowing, rewrite the dialogue. I'm like, I haven't even written the dialogue yet. What are you doing? Everyone editor. A very poor sketch of a man in a coat holding a rifle. So the idea here is, yeah, a couple of word balloons. Let's say that this is the horse. A little bit of dialogue from Lucifer. Now see, I can already tell that I would have to change this, because having the horizon up there, all of the other characters' heads that are on the ground plane should be in line with that, even though their bodies get smaller. What I really need is to have the horizon go through the waist. And the reason for that is so that I can have I don't know if you guys know the concept of hanging figures on the horizon, but this is something that's covered in Loomis's Figure Drawing for All It's Worth. It's covered in a wide variety of books about visual storytelling. And the idea is that whatever's on the horizon, things that are of the same height will line up with that. So let's say, in this case, if the character that's closest to the front, his waist, the horizon is at his waist, it means that every other character that is about the same height, their waists will also line up, meaning that I can take a character. The cats are like knocking shit off of my other desk. What the? Killing me. Even a character that's really tiny in the background, this little stick figure I'm drawing right now. You know what? I feel like, you guys tell me if you want me to put the camera a little bit closer, because I almost feel like these are so tiny as I'm looking at it that you guys probably can't even see anything as I'm drawing this. But if this is fun, I'll leave it. If not, I'll put the camera a little bit lower. The only challenge for me is making sure it's not so low that it's in front of the drawing while I'm working on it. But the idea that if you have a character that's really tiny, hang on, cats are now chewing on shit. Get off there. Oh. All right. So, the idea is that whether you've got a figure that's very, very tiny or very, very nearby, that if they are approximately the same size, then they will line up, whatever body part is on the horizon will line up with all of those figures. So if all the figures were approximately 6 feet or maybe like 5'10", and the horizon went through their head, no matter how big or tall their bodies are, the heads would always be on the horizon. And in this case, I'm putting the horizon at the waist. And what this allows me to do is position characters at different heights, at different distances, and still have them. So now you've got a character where you can see his full body in there. He's tiny, but his waist is still on this horizon line. And then the area behind the word balloons, it's not well, it depends. We'll see how it comes out. But I was about to say the challenge, and it shouldn't be that big of a challenge, but sometimes it's me trying to fill the page with too much detail. But the area where all the word balloons are going to be, realistically, I can just throw buildings back there. And the challenge is to make it enough of a building that it feels real, like actually put windows on it, but without wasting time putting extraneous details that I know are going to be covered by word balloons. So you've got the town there, so you get that sense of, just by putting a couple of buildings in there, a little bit of signage, not necessarily in this thumbnail, but you'll be able to, it'll give you that effect of small town that's standing up against this figure that's coming at them. I see in the question in the chat, Mighty Geek Studios asks, "What issue am I thumbnailing?" I am thumbnailing the 8th and final issue of this series. So this is actually the climax. This is the finish of the story. I figure if you've been watching my channel, then you're getting all of the spoilers anyway. You're gonna see me write my way to the climax. And in fact, if you had been watching the videos where I was working on the individual story thumbnails, I've shown you basically, I can't remember if I drew the final issue there, but each one of these, like 8, 9, these each represent a page of it. And I've done all 40 pages of the final issue. So I've shown you how the series ends, and you'll see me revisit that as I work my way through the full thumbnails. But it's Lucifer's fall from heaven. He fights Michael at the end, and Michael casts him out. That's not a big spoiler. For me, what makes the story compelling is not the how, like the what happens, but the why. So it really comes down to the conversation that Lucifer and Michael have during that final battle. And I say conversation lightly because it's really two people fighting and yelling at each other. I'm doing a little bit of that Chris Claremont where I have people like kind of talking and giving soliloquies during combat, which I know can be a little bit cheesy, but it's the era of comics I'm inspired and influenced by. For most of my comics, there really isn't a whole lot of talking during the fights, unless it's a character communicating, hey, you go here, you duck, or screw you, or just yelling at somebody because they're angry. I try not to get too carried away in terms of the dialogue during a fight scene. I'm gonna need to bring the horse down a little bit lower because even though we're looking up, the horizon being low, this horse is still probably a little bit too high. So for the most part, I'm happy with how this panel, it's not that different. It's just me clearing out the details or tightening up the details that are in here. But that's all I need and really to communicate the story is Lucifer returning, some angels running, some angels coming out to stand up against him. The angels now standing up against him. One guy saying, this is your chance to surrender, and Lucifer killing him. That's all that happens on this page. It's a very simple, short scene, very quick. Like I said, I like to keep my scenes bracketed, as it were, so that if I can tell an entire story beat across a spread, 2 pages. So whether you're reading print or digital, I keep the scenes short. But in print, it's kind of like you read one spread, events happen, then you turn the page, move on to the next one. So let's see here. Older angel. And of course, they're angels, they're immortal. It really doesn't matter. Age is kind of irrelevant. It's more of just how I want a person to look or feel. And normally at this point, a lot of times while I'm doing thumbnails, little bits of dialogue will pop into my head as I go. None are coming right now, but if I do think of something, just write it down and I'll include that when I do my lettering. So in a way, it's almost like I work Marvel style with myself, where I leave space for dialogue, but I may not necessarily work out the beats unless an expression at the thumbnail stage really comes to me. Angel standing up to Lucifer. Okay. And I'm just gonna black this out like a silhouette. What you're really seeing here is the leg of a horse in very close foreground, silhouetted. And I'm actually wondering whether this should be silhouetted because the way that I have the first panel set up, Lucifer is backlit. There's sun coming across there. So, yeah, this probably should not be backlit. I will make a note. is another thing to make note of in my thumbnails. For contrast wise, it is nice to have this dark shape across all of these frontlit characters, but the way that I've set up the lighting in here is specific. So I will say horse leg in foreground, do not backlight. I have to make little notes like this, otherwise I will just see that and I'm doing my layouts and completely forget about it. And mind you, I've only done one graphic novel plus 8 issues, well, this being the 8th issue of this series. And I mean, I've done some other small comics beforehand, but I'd like to believe that keeping the lighting consistent is something that, let's say, 20, 30, 50 comics in, when I've drawn enough issues that a lot of this stuff becomes common sense, that I don't need to constantly make notes to remind myself not to do conflicting lighting. Because there's definitely places within previous issues where I didn't make these notes, and then I'll light a figure from one side in a scene and then change that lighting in the same scene, which I think is bad form. I think it, on a subconscious level, it confuses the reader. It doesn't make the storytelling as clear. Let me put it this way, if you keep your lighting consistent, it aids in your storytelling. So inconsistencies, fight against it. Do not backlight. Little notes there. Let's see here. Mighty Geek Studios says, I usually do thumbnails against a printer's template to see how it looks at the final size, and always keeping notes. Yeah, I think that, well, I think that that does make a lot of sense, except for the fact that because I'm working in ink, I can't draw and erase as much. If I were doing my thumbnails in pencil, then it would make sense to do it at the right size and then just draw something, and if I don't like it, erase it, move it around. Because I'm working in ink, I tend to make a lot of changes and draw different variations of a page. And because of that, I would end up having tons of sheets. And I already do usually for each page that I do. It's surprising that I was able to fit this whole page on one sheet, because frequently, if I'm doing a challenging page, it may take me 4 pages of thumbnails to work out all of the details. But I think that that's not a problem at all if you're working in pencil and you just erase. But for me, since each time I put a line down, that's it, it's permanent, I do it in these smaller frames instead of doing it at scale. And the other reason why I do these tiny is because I will get caught up in trying to make a nice picture if I draw things at scale. It's not, no matter how much I tell myself, you're just thumbnailing, you're just working out story details, don't worry about it, whether whether it fits the page or not, whether it's exactly in proportion. It keeps me from sitting there and trying to really noodle and start drawing the page right. And the other thing is, I like drawing things way smaller than the final page, because I feel like if the composition works tiny, then it'll work large. Sometimes you work out something and at full size it seems to, well, if your story works at printed size, that's really all that matters. So it's not like it's a detriment. But I find for me, it helps me think clear when I can see it in tiny stick figures. But again, this is what works for me. Everyone should use whatever creative process works best for them. And it sounds like you, Mighty Geek Studios, have a really good sense of what works for you in terms of storytelling and pacing. So you should definitely stick with that. So let's see here. I am now on to page 10. Let me go through my thumbnails real quick. My thumbnails, my outline. Although I almost wonder at this point, considering the fact that I added a lot of pages, my original outline was set to fit this issue into the 24 pages I normally do. And now that it's 40 pages, I almost wonder if I've wandered too far for that roadmap, and I should really just work from my thumbnails now. So this is the page that actually ends up where the scenes go across 3 pages. So this scene is basically Michael. He, in the previous page, he emerged from underwater where he was drowning. Lucifer shot him at the end of issue 7, and he fell into a river. So now he's emerged from the water, and he is flying back. Well, yeah, he's flying back basically well, he's going to hunt down Lucifer. He doesn't know where he is yet. But Lucifer also previously in this issue has lied to Uriel, the angel of death, and told him that Michael is the one who killed his brother-in-law, Raphael, when it was really Lucifer, because, I mean, he is the Lord of Lies. But I wanted to have this battle here. And the battle takes place across 3 pages, where the climax happens on the page turn. So what I really want to happen on this page, the end, the dominant shot here is Michael getting caught in the air and slammed down by Uriel. So let's start again, some really thin lines here. I like to think cause and effect. So even though these pages will not be 9-panel grids, dividing it that way kind of gives me a little framework for, I think, in terms of each tier is a beginning, an action, a reaction, and a result. Or a beginning, a middle, and an end. Each page is a story, so it's a beginning, middle, and end. And then within the tiers, the tier has a beginning, middle, and end. Sometimes it may just be 1 panel. Sometimes it may be 3 panels. Sometimes it might be 4 panels. So I think what I want this page to end on is Michael getting slammed into the ground. So let's say, let's move this up a little bit. Only because I'm going to need some height if I really want Uriel to stand out and to feel large and massive. And again, it's not about getting it right, getting it perfect. I may end up doing multiple versions of this across multiple sheets of paper. But my first instinct is, even though the shot that I wanted to define this page is Michael getting yanked out of the sky, it's a callback to issue 2. But I'm starting with what I think ends this page. And a lot of times that's kind of how I work, is starting at the ending and working backwards. Or starting, like as I showed you with the previous thumbnails, starting with the end of the scene and the beginning of the scene, and then just sort of slowly filling in the blanks. And that's a lot of how I draw, it's a lot of how I write, is just starting with what I feel works, and then moving inward and moving stuff around until I have something that tells the story that I'm trying to tell. See, Mighty Geek Studios says do an upshot of the character. This probably will be an upshot, but right now on this first pass, I'm just previous page where I've got very, very rough sketches of what I want the story to be, and then I'll go in and do individual sketches where I'll work out the pose, the angle, and that sort of thing. So right now, the angle, if I happen to nail the angle, that's great, but I try not to be too concerned with it. Plus, you have to remember, this is just one stage in my storytelling, because I'm going to go through all of these thumbnails when they're done, and then I'm going to do basically my rough pencils. So that's the place where I really will, I'll break out photo reference, I'll pose little figures, I'll pose myself, and take selfies or record myself video doing different actions, and that's when I'll work out, this is the actual pose, this is the actual angle. If there's fabric here, this is what I need the fabric to look like. Yeah. My point being is that I don't really get too carried away or too concerned with getting the angles right. For instance, just even the perspective. I've always tried to draw Uriel, not perspective, proportion. I've always tried to draw Uriel in this whole series as kind of a larger than life figure. Like he's almost like the Incredible Hulk. He's much bigger than the other archangels. In this one, he's about the same size. So that alone right there, that's off on this panel. And that's something that when I go back and I do a more detailed thumbnail, kind of fleshing this panel out, that I'll fix, but it's not super important at this stage. I'm thinking more about sort of the composition as a whole. So let's say that this opens with Michael flying. So let's say there's a really thin tier up here. Now, the note that I made is that Michael hears a gunshot and flies towards heaven. I assume he would be flying towards heaven already, so this might require extra panels. Let's start with just a close-up of him. And see, I jump around. I've got the end, and then I'm going up here to the beginning, and then I'm going to move back and forth. And I've got some leeway, actually, because even though I have laid out this story across because I've laid this scene out across three pages, I have room to work out all these details and move scenes around so that him getting slammed to the ground can be on the next page. I can really focus on using the first 2 pages to set up him flying, hearing the gunshot. I could really make page 2 focus all on the fighting. I could have the third page, which will be page 12 of this scene, focus just on like a splash page of Uriel getting the axe in his head. Or I could have part of the fight spill across onto that page too. Let's see. I see Art with Osier says, "Hey, Jeremy, I just finished live streaming. I thought I would miss your stream." Well, you know what? I'm glad that you were able to make it. It's, I try to stick to the same time there. But, I understand everyone's got their own schedules. That's what I love about YouTube is that there's always time to, you can always go back and watch the replays. Mighty Geek Studios also mentioned that in terms of this shot, he said that doing an upshot of the character, continuing that thought, he said this way he can look massive without being out of proportion. Yes, that's very true, and that's probably what I'll end up doing when I do resize them. Or when I do additional versions. I may not get around to doing that until I do my my pencils. Now, ideally, the idea here of starting this page off with Michael flying, the idea of Michael flying and hearing a gunshot, this is one of those things that I kind of hoped I could convey all in one panel, but anytime you've got a character acting and then reacting, that's in theory that's kind of two panels there. But kind of going for sort of a Superman vibe here, and I've used shots similar to this in other issues. But the real idea here is conveying the fact that he's flying. Now, I think the thing that I'm struggling over is whether he's changing direction or not. Because I almost feel like he would be flying. He's definitely hunting for Lucifer, and I think he's got a good sense of the fact that Lucifer is going to attack heaven. But that said, is he already flying towards heaven? Because if he's not flying towards heaven, the question is, if he's flying somewhere else, where would he be going? And I haven't really set that up. But I guess the idea here is of him hearing the gunshot is that it increases the sense of urgency. And that's really kind of what I wanted to create here, is that he is trying to stop someone. He hears that the thing that he's trying to stop from happening has already occurred, is starting to occur in terms of Lucifer's invasion. But then this conflict with Uriel happens. Uriel snatches him out of the sky, and that's exactly what Lucifer planned. Lucifer was actually hoping that Uriel would kill Michael, and he wouldn't have to deal with him. He figures who's going to be better at killing Michael than the angel of death. So in a sense, it's on a structural level, it's Michael seeing that he is running out of time to help the other angels, and then someone gets in his way and makes it even harder for him to get back in time. That's the story beat that's happening here. So in this case, see, now this is one of those things where I move off to the side and start thinking about other possibilities. So let's say that you've got if Michael is heading towards heaven, there's two possibilities. There's heaven in the foreground. Put some trees between the city or town. Behind that, there's mountains in the distance. And in the distance, in the way distance, well, he's the size of a condor now. But in the distance, let's say that there is a lamb this might work. Is if I actually just, in a way, this is a continuation of the previous page. So if this page ends with an angel resisting Lucifer and getting shot, then this page shows the sound of that getting shot and the town. And it's got an angel in the distance And you can't tell who it is at the distance. Because part of the thing is when I first started here, I thought, okay, we kind of want to have a hero shot of Michael close up. But I think that for narrative purposes, it makes more sense to show a wider shot, the context of that gunshot that we just saw being heard and echoing in the distance, and then seeing someone even farther away seeing it. Then going to a shot which, for space sake, is likely to be one tier, and it's going to be one. In fact, I might even do this as an inset shot. But let's say it's one tier, and we can go excuse me, a little bit closer on Michael, close enough that you can see worry on his face. That's what I'm going for. Just little wide eyes and a, oh shit, Mr. Bill. Again, do you guys need me to move the camera closer to the thumbnails as I'm doing this? Because I'm not sure if you guys can see this at all. In fact, I'm not sure if this is still on at all because it looks like a bunch of people have fallen off the stream. And as I look over my iPad, what I see is that it keeps spinning and it's saying that it's retrying. And I don't know if that's from the streaming on my end that my phone is dropping off and it's not still streaming, or whether it's the crappy Wi-Fi where I have my iPad, because that tends to fall off of our home network. Now, it's not particularly important per se, but I realized I can make more of a visual connection with Michael if I push him, if I draw clouds underneath him, then you can get the sense, oh, he's really up in the sky, he's flying. So I'm just redrawing the same thing, but making it a point to put clouds in underneath. Now, I've noticed that we are at 58 minutes here, so I am probably going to wrap this up landing. Now, the one thing I did here that I shouldn't have done was because I was so focused on his expression, I made Michael's head bigger, and I really shouldn't have. Because the size that I have his body in this first one, that's kind of the funny thing about, and that's another reason why I don't want to draw larger and get too caught up in it, is I don't want to sit here and just start drawing too many. I don't want to try to fix all of the storytelling details. But let's see. Just so that I can keep this straight, I'm gonna go ahead and put my my page numbers in here. Which, again, not numbers, but I tend to, when I'm writing the full page, when I'm making my layout for the full page, I'll put page 10 and page 11. I write out the full words here, but then I just put the numbering there, because that way it allows me to focus in and say, oh wait, this is the one that has my whole composition, and then the numbers just indicate the different variations that I'm going to slot into these panels. Page 10, page 11. So this one up here will be 10-1, and this will be 10-2. And mind you, as I go and I work out the rest of this page and across, as I work out the rest of this whole scene, I may end up crossing out these numbers and making them different numbers, or I may end up crossing them out, and I'll figure out over the course of working out this page that I need to have an entirely different image for that. That is part of the process of thumbnailing for me, is being able to just move stuff around, slot stuff in, slot stuff out. It's almost as if I'm drawing the same comic page over 10 times before I draw the real one. It's like rehearsal, or an athlete practicing running drills, and I'm looking at all the different possibilities and variations of how this can play out and what can go wrong with this on the actual page, and fixing it before I get to the actual final page. So, all right, I hope the stream didn't drop off, because it seemed like I lost people all at once. But that said, if you did have extra comments and you didn't get a chance to get them in, then feel free to leave them on the comments for the video, and I will try to answer all of you. Or if you have questions you want me to answer next week, then you can always come back to the stream and ask questions next week. I've got an upcoming convention July 14th through 16th. I'll be at Amazing Las Vegas Comic Con, and I'll try to give you guys a reminder again next week as well. So, again, thank you all for joining me this weekend while I'm thumbnailing, continuing the process of creating my comic. If you would like to get additional bonus videos, I do one bonus video per month, sometimes a little bit more if I have time. I'll post those at patreon.com/Jeremy. That's /GERIMI. If you'd like to read some of my comics, you can go to comics.jeremy.net. And if you'd like to purchase some of my comics in print or digital, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. That'll forward you to my Amazon author page. So thank you again for joining me. That's it for now. Go be creative.